Congressman, before I get into, I'm a numbers guy, so we want to talk about some of the numbers. I want to talk about the Pledge to America and all of that. And, we talk about the economy here. We talk about the global economy. I talk about the political landscape as it relates to the numbers and as it relates to the economy and individual stewardship. But before I do that, I don't want that to overshadow something a whole lot more important in the grand scheme of things. And I want to thank you for what you're doing, to your efforts to try to defund Planned Parenthood. And I know that God is going to bless you and your house for standing so firm on that. We so appreciate it. And I just want to thank you for that. And I hope it's going. Is it going okay? What do you think about it?
And thanks for your esteem and for your encouragement. And I believe that we are on the verge of achieving something that people involved in the pro-life movement since 1973 have only hoped for, and that is, I think we are on the verge of enacting legislation that will deny federal funding to Planned Parenthood of America through Title X. Right now, Planned Parenthood receives more than $350 million in federal and state grants and support. That was their last annual report. And sticking to the heartbreaking numbers, that was in the same period of time that they boasted of having performed 324,008 abortions. The largest abortion provider in America should not also be the largest recipient of federal funding. And there is now more than 160 co-sponsors, Republicans and some Democrats on Capitol Hill, that are coming together to say that no more public funding will flow into Title X clinics. And the evidence that's mounting from these video records that are being released, I believe we're reaching a point where we can end public funding for Planned Parenthood once and for all.
Wow, that is awesome, and thank you. And we're going to be praying. We have millions of listeners, and we're going to re-air this tomorrow, and we have millions more on Saturday, and so many from Indiana. And I know because of that, Indiana people want you in the State House as governor. Don't even think about it. We need you in Washington. Come on, we need. That's where we need you. Hope that you will continue to pray about that. I know you've talked about that with your family over the holidays, and but anyway, I know that.
Well, we have, and we're going to take. I'll say to your listeners that we're going to take the next several months and try to prayerfully consider how we can best continue to serve our values and continue to serve the people of Indiana, and we'll come to some decision a little bit later this year.
Well, we're here for you. Anything we can do, that's what we're about, and I'd love to help you get that word out. Here's the thing. I know, Congress, you've been fighting for budget restraint, budget cuts, budget reforms for a long time. None of this is new to you. It's new to some on Capitol Hill, but it's not new to you. Are we going to get our $100 billion?
I believe we are. We had a very productive meeting just in the last 12 hours, Dan, where Republican leadership has now given a directive to our committees to come up with a full $100 billion as a starting point on this continuing resolution that will come to the floor next week. My comments to my colleagues from early on has been that in the Pledge to America, we talked about long-term fiscal solvency. We talked about making the hard choices in the long term. But one of the things we were very clear about was that House Republicans would enact at least $100 billion in savings in this year. And we're working through that process right now. But I am confident that when the dust settles, when the final vote is called, you'll see House Republicans united behind a plan to reduce spending in this year to 2008 levels or more, and I think it's a small amount, Dan. As you know, you're the numbers guy. It's a small amount when you think of a $1.5 trillion annual deficit, when you think of a $14 trillion national debt. But as I said last night to the team, you never get a second chance at a first impression, and this is an important early test. We need to keep our word to the American people. We need to find that $100 billion or more, and I believe we will.
Great. The Wall Street Journal this morning, I don't know if you saw it, had an article talking about this, and it kind of, you might read into it and think there is some divisiveness among the GOP. Now, I like debate. I think it's healthy in any kind of budgeting process or anything else for that matter. But that doesn't mean it's divisive, and it doesn't have to be. It's just good, healthy debate. Is there any divisiveness going on?
Oh, gosh, no. I think House Republicans are united in our commitment to put our nation's government on a pathway toward fiscal solvency. What we're working out right now in the legislative process is the details, and I think that millions of Americans should be encouraged that the debate in Washington has shifted from not how much to spend, but how much to cut. We're working those things out, and I as you kindly observed, I was battling against runaway federal spending back when there was a Republican president in the White House,
right.
And so I remember back in the day when we felt like a voice crying in the wilderness. That day is over, and Republicans now are simply working out the details of the best way to go forward to ensure that we put our nation on a sustainable fiscal footing for this generation and the next.
Great. I had when was it, Tuesday? I think I had Steve Forbes on the program. He's on often with me, and I appreciate that. We usually end up talking about taxes. We didn't on Tuesday. There were too many other things to talk about, and he and I are kind of on the same page with this flat tax thing. Do you think there's any chance that we're going to see any kind of major tax reform? I'd like to see the IRS trashed and start all over again with a flat tax. But are we going to see any major tax reform, do you think, in the next 2 years?
Well, I think there's some outside chance of that. There unfortunately, and I respect.
Not if you want to skip the break.
And I pray for him and his family. But there has in the last 2 years often been a very wide gulf between what the president's rhetoric has been and what his administration's policies have been. But we're hearing the president talk about tax simplification. We're hearing the president talk about lowering at least the corporate tax rate and eliminating deductions. I gave a speech at the Detroit Economic Club, Dan, that I'd love you to take a peek at back in December, in which I threw my arms around the Forbes Army Hall Rabushka flat tax. It's been talked about for 20 years, and I used that the backdrop of that storied Detroit Economic Club to talk about the 5 pillars of economic growth, and tax reform and relief are a centerpiece of that. And I simply believe, even though I've been a big fan of the fair tax, I think if we could repeal the IRS and the Internal Revenue Code and the income tax, a national sales tax would be preferable. But I believe a flat tax is an idea whose time has come. It's capturing the attention of countries around the world, and we might be able to take a couple of steps in that direction under this administration, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, I sure hope so, because I think we are in desperate need of some sort of tax reform, even if it isn't that. I mean, we need tax reform if we're ever going to leave a healthy America to our children and grandchildren, and it's something that we've got to continue to fight for. Congressman, I want to thank you so much for being on the program. I know your time is limited. I hope you'll come back and visit again with us. I sure appreciate it, and just pray God's blessing on you, and thank you for all that you're doing for America.
Dan, thanks for your prayers, and we rely on the prayers of the faithful across Indiana, and we know we receive prayers around the country. And I remember seeing President Bush right after September the 11th. The first thing I said to him was, I want you to know my little family's praying for you just about every day. Is on our knees by name. And he said what I'll say to you. He looked me in the eye and he said, keep it up. It matters.
It sure does. Wow, that's great stuff. Thank you, Congressman. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, you've just heard Congressman Pence with us from Indiana, and we need to be praying for men and women like Congressman Pence. It's not easy to stand on those convictions, and I'm so grateful that he is, and he's not going to be able to continue that without